Mm-hmm.
All right.
So this debate is the name of this debate is called California should be split into several states, and I am the affirmative. And this debate is a policy debate because of the words California, should, and states. The term split, meaning separated so that multiple states can be created, in this case, three. The Cal 3 plan would be the perfect legislation to accomplish this. My first advantage for why California should be split into three states is because splitting California would grant regional communities more power to make decisions based on the specific needs of their people. With smaller borders comes smaller populations, which of course leads to more personalized laws for each state's citizens. According to connectusfund.org, it might even be possible that taxes would be lowered in all three states because there will be less bureaucracy to manage. Therefore, creating three new states would be better for each Californian because their voice would very much be louder than it currently is. And that's all I have.
That's the affirmative.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you say that the only reason why um, it would be better is because it would give people more of a voice. Do you think that there's any other way that people would have more of a voice?
I feel this way. The government of each state will be able to focus more on the people, and because they won't have huge problems to deal with that like a whole state of California with millions and millions of people has right now.
Do you think it would hit a reset button on the state's economy?
Mm,
Because we're one of the highest ranking state economies for Washington. So do you think that if we were to divide California into three states, that it would devour that? That it would take us years and years to rebuild that?
I don't think it would. I think actually each state would have a head start.
That's true. All right, I gotta keep asking questions. Got 3 more minutes. Do you find it extremely necessary?
Uh, I feel if it's in a person's interest to want change or to want a certain law or bill to happen in their region, I feel that it could help them very much. This change.
Uh, do you think the state would still be underrepresented in Washington?
I'm sorry, what was that? Say one
Do
more
you
time.
think the state would still be underrepresented in Washington?
Mm, I don't. I don't think it will.
All right. So for this, I'm doing the negative. Uh, so the reasons why California should not be split into three states. Basically, the United States government is not likely to approve any change to California because, according to gov.com, California represents one of the largest economies in the world. This influence is one of the primary reasons that the United States can wield its influence around the world. Splitting the state into three new ones would actually lessen that benefit that we give to. Oh, my legs up, my bad. Would actually lessen the benefit that we give to DC and to the United States, which is why Congress is definitely most unlikely to pass the law. Uh, Another thing is that splitting California into three states is not fully necessary. There are so many other ways to go about it. There's nothing that stands in the way of letting California split up its governing approach into three separate categories. It would need to become three states to provide better support for each region. A change, uh, it would require a change to the Constitution, which is one of the only backdraws. Um, The state could even create a system where 3 governors would be in charge of each region, with 3 legislators working to support local needs. It works in the Commonwealth realm, and other self-rule options are obviously ruled out because we're a democracy. It would require significant government investment into new infrastructure, which is a big one because we may be large and unlovely, but it has the infrastructure in place to support the entire population already. And if it were divided into 3, that would be a little bit screwed up because we already can support the whole population, and it would take a long time for the benefits of all of this to come to lower taxes because we'd be paying high taxes trying to figure out infrastructure. It also can risk dividing the rich and the poor, which is one of the last things that we need to do as parts of California. So basically, like, if you divide it into 3, there would be NorCal, Central Cal, and SoCal, right? Yeah. Some of those areas are actually poorer than others, and by dividing the rich and the poor, you face some big problems. For instance, with places with rich people, there's obviously, with more money, there's obviously more funding towards school systems, public roads, bathrooms, and things like that. And in the places where it's divided, for instance, like Southern California, San Diego is not as rich as people make it out to be. You would face poor education, poor funding for schools, poor funding for roads. Whereas when we're at the plateau of not having California in 3 states and just having it supported by 1, we do not face that at all. As a matter of fact, it's fairly taken care of because the higher money-making parts of the state and the lower money-making parts of the state come together to make a plateau with taxes, which eventually solve a lot of the problems in poor communities. And granted, really rich areas would just probably become really rich areas and not really have any extra part that they need. So that the different regions experience unique economic conditions. So if California were to split into 3 states, the region would no longer have the same ability to reinforce, like, for instance, the lagging sectors, the poorer communities that I had just mentioned. And the adverse impacts on the economy would become more profound, while the benefits of growth would actually really not be as profound because we'd really only have like 1 rich state between all of us instead of just having 1 nice, fairly wealthy state. It would actually be the state itself would actually be underrepresented in Washington, which is crazy. The current population of California is approximately 39 million people, according to gov.com. If the Cal 3 plan were to be implemented, the new California, NoCal, and SoCal would have 6.2 million, 6.7 million, and 7 million people, respectively. And although this plan would increase representation in Washington for the region, it still wouldn't create the same equity in a vote because of the structure of the U.S. Constitution. The 3 new states would receive the same number of senators as Wyoming, a place where less than 600,000 people live, according to U.S. Census projections. The transformation would shift the voice in Congress to something closer to Pennsylvania or Illinois, because of how the ratio is represented and how the votes would work out. So basically, like, because of those smaller states, we would have smaller people counts, which means actually less representation instead of a louder voice. So basically, those 3 states would not be as well taken care of versus how well heard our 1 state is. And yeah, it would most likely hit a reset button on the state's economy. California has worked for the past 5 decades to create a system of statewide policies to make the state healthy and a happy place to live. Splitting the state into 3 would actually probably most likely undo almost all of the work of previous generations, forcing legislators of each new state to hit the reset button and create their own policies. The Cal 3, basically that's why the Cal 3 idea was removed from the ballot. So, questions?
You mentioned that um, instead of the splitting the California to three states, we can have three governors. Um, do you feel that would having three governors in California? Do you feel that would create a more polarizing effect between each region and even promote separation?
I don't think it would actually end up promoting separation. I get where you're coming from with that, but at the end of the day, people, yes, California is filled with a bunch of people who believe extremely differently, but with having three governors, it would make sure that everyone's voice is heard because certain sectors of the state actually are more right or more left, and it happens to be in like those three sectors that they're trying to divide by. So the governors would all be able to talk out with each other and figure out the best way to go about actually not segregating and actually bringing California together.
Hmm. And do you have any alternative to for any other way, maybe besides three governors and three different states, that the state can allow more people's voices to be heard?
Um, Honestly, I think that we could just do a better job as a state to hear other people's voices. I don't really think that we need to be divided into three different states because if you're talking about dividing into three different states only fights for that. That doesn't fight for bringing people closer together. So that question's pretty much irrelevant.
Hmm. All right, those are my questions.
All right.
So,
I think you go for 3 minutes after your question.
mhm. So for my rebuttal, you mentioned that the three state plan is not necessary at all, really. And well, I just want to say, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it's really it can be more beneficial than it sounds. That if someone cares to have their voice heard, they would vote for the Cal 3 plan because it offers a strategy where each state would be able to create and use their own resources rather than share among the entire state. And that is all I have for my rebuttal.
Do I go? How long am I supposed to go for? No.
The most 3 minutes.
Okay. Um. So yeah, once again, I understand what you're saying about it sounds like I'm fighting for segregation more or less, and that there are communities and people that are not being as heard in California that would be if we were divided in three states. But once again, to go back to the lower representation in Washington, if we were divided into three states, all three states would be looked at as a more minuscule state and therefore would not hold as much place in the office. So California as a whole state divided into three would actually not be heard nearly as much as California as one with three governors. And if there were three governors that were able to talk about their parts of the state's problems all together and then come to a conclusion that would support everyone and represent that to the state, I think that would be a lot healthier of a decision than dividing California into three states. Because also, once again, in terms of taxes and in terms of certain economies for each state and in terms of rebuilding, the poor states are going to have worse school system, worse roads, all of that. So there's really no justice that you're doing to the voices that are already most likely are probably the ones not being heard. It's actually worse. Um, so if we're gonna go into that and go into voices not being heard and people feeling like they're left out, and that is why it is the only fair way to suit California is by dividing it into three states. Uh, I don't believe you're right. I think that really truly the only fair way for everyone to be heard and for California to have a bigger jurisdictional vote is if everyone is in place and in sync with three governors, and therefore we would have more pull in terms of in DC and Washington House. How many minutes has it been? gonna say it's been 2. I'm like,
About 2.
perfect. Gonna give myself 1 more minute. But yeah, so I understand the points that you are making with all of this and how it actually, in some sense, could help. But I believe that I'm winning this debate because I've made a few more points and I've dug a little bit deeper. And this is the part where I talk about why I'm winning the debate, right? Perfect. But I believe that I am winning this debate because I am digging a little bit deeper and I'm proving some things of yours definitely irrelevant. So, yeah.
Okay. So I want to finish this off by saying that I believe I should win this debate because I feel it is a more beneficial solution to where each state can have better representation of their people and more personalized and easier ways to identify each other and the population and the citizens. And yes, that is it.
Are you still recording?